Hey guys, Matthew McIntyre here with the first weekly update for the game Maledictor. You might notice that the game name is slightly different than it was in the last week's video, so let's lead in with that. First change of the week was changing the name. I did quite a bit of research when I first named the game to try to make sure that there were no other games named that, and I didn't find anything, but couple of nights ago, my friend Bruin messaged me and let me know he found a game with the same name. So I had to go in and change that. And hopefully now it shouldn't have any other games named Maledictor. I did quite a bit of searching on that one and nothing showed up. So hopefully we won't have to change the game name again. I actually kind of like the new name a little bit better, so it worked out in the end. Now, take a look at the notes here for the changes through the week. Made elevators. I'm very proud of those because they're not quite as simple as you would think. I fixed some issues with ceiling lights and kind of expanded them to make them a little bit more modular, which is nice. I figured out a lot of lighting issues. That is the running theme for this week is lighting errors. And we'll get more into that later because we're going to talk about the lighting for the game. But before that, we have breakable windows in the game now. You shoot them and they break. Technology. Made a lot more level textures, some materials. I made some extra sprites, things like that. More lighting errors. More collision error fixes. Lighting optimizations. So, just trying to squeeze a little bit more performance out of the game, and really, it's not that big of an issue because, we're not running at 4K textures or anything, so we can go a little advanced with lighting. Like I said in the first video, we're not doing ray tracing or anything, but still, dynamic lights and volumetric lights, they're a little bit more resource heavy in modern games, but you shouldn't really have to worry about it too much considering nothing else is very taxing in this game. Fix some UVs. That's something really only I care about. I don't think many people know what UVs even are, so nothing to worry about there. And more lighting errors. So, speaking of lighting, I guess that's a good excuse to go in and talk about some of the lighting issues we came up with and just the lighting in general for the game. Now, if you've ever done any editing in the map editor for Doom before, then you'll know that lighting tends to work as just an overall brightness for the map, and then you set higher or lower light values for specific rooms as you want to. But Unreal doesn't quite work like that. Unreal 5 really pushes realistic lighting, and so the only way that you can get an overall map brightness is with something like the sun. But the game takes place at night, so what do you do with that? You might have noticed at some point in your life that nighttime's pretty dark, and lights don't really travel very far at night. So, how do you light a map at night? There's a couple of ways, but the way that I went with is you add fog into the game so that lights can hit it and get diffused, and it creates a more even light, and it also just looks really, really nice. So that's what I've done. I use fog in a lot of my maps to carry lights and to get more even lighting. But that comes with an issue or two. The issue that I was running into this week was I started having ceiling lights bleeding through the ceiling. And at first I thought it was an issue with the lights, but it turned out that it was actually an issue with the fog going through walls and the lights lighting up the fog and getting carried through the ceiling. So that doesn't really happen with the walls so much as it does happen with the ceiling. And I did find a fix, which is, either you can move the lights or you can toggle on volumetric shadows so that the light is actually casting a shadow onto the fog with the ceiling itself. And that way you get the lights to not bleed through. Now, that does cause one little issue of the light being a little bit more expensive to render, but, we're not running 4K textures with our game, and we have maybe like 20 poly models, very low poly models, sprites, things like that. So we have a lot of performance headroom with the game. That being said, I'm still trying to be mindful about the lighting effects and trying not to make them too expensive to run. So now the lights don't clip through the ceiling, or technically they still do, but we know how to fix it so that you don't really see it where it's an issue. But there were some other issues that we ran into with lighting, and one of the ones that I mentioned first was changing up the ceiling lights. The way lights work in Unreal is kind of weird, where it has different kinds of lights, and they each have their own quirks. So there's point lights, which are the main ones that you use. It's just kind of a ball of light that you throw in. You can use that for a light bulb, and it'll cast shadows and everything, but it might not look the most natural in cases where you have specifically shaped lights, like fluorescent light bulbs, how they're, if you ever look in an office building or in a school or something, the big long rectangular lights on the ceiling, those kind of cast more hard-edged lights because they're more set inside of a specific shape. So you have rectangular lights and stage lights in Unreal that have kind of like the shutter effect where you can open and narrow the little shutters. And that creates a really nice hard-edged shadow with the light. The problem with that is that that light does not light up sprites. That's not really an issue for most games because most games don't use a whole lot of sprites. Our game, however, uses a lot of sprites. So I had to set up the ceiling lights to be able to choose between point lights and rectangular lights. So that way I can have ceiling lights light up sprites, or I can just have that effect if I want them to. So we got that fixed. Then we ran into an issue with light clusters. Now, another quirk with lighting in Unreal, which is kind of strange to me because Unreal 5, it's all about lighting. But you cannot have more than 4 stationary lights overlapping one another. And that means that if you have 5 stationary lights, for instance, all overlapping each other, and by that I mean the attenuation settings, so that means their light fall off. It's basically in a big dome that shows where the light will fall off. So if you wanted to travel really far, then you have a higher attenuation setting, or if you just wanted to be like a little tiny light, then a really small attenuation setting. So if you have 5 overlapping stationary lights, then it will automatically convert some of them into dynamic lights. Dynamic lights are rendered live as you're playing the game, so they're much more expensive. I think it was like they're 3 times more expensive to use dynamic lights than just regular lights. So, like I said, we're not running 4K textures, and the most polys we've gotten a model is like 20. So we have a lot of performance headroom, but it still doesn't mean that I want to be inefficient with my light sources. So I had to mess around with attenuation settings, had to kind of trim some lights for certain effects and things like that. And I got it working out now, and it looks pretty nice. So that's what matters really in the end. And that's about it for this update. Make sure to check in next week for next week's update. Hopefully we'll be done with E1M2. These early maps are kind of slow because I have to do other things, like I have to make textures for them, I have to make more sprites, and I have to make certain systems like the elevator, for instance. So it's a little bit more slow going for some of these early levels, but hopefully we'll finish up E1M2 and then maybe even have E1M3 started by the next update video. Make sure you follow the Twitter account for more frequent updates so you don't have to wait for the next video to see if we make it or not. And I will see you next time. Thanks a lot, everybody.